Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, Cypher, and today we have a lot of news to cover. We're going to be covering it all for you because that's what we do on Thursdays. So if this is the first time you've joined us on a Thursday, we do this every Thursday at roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. These shows are generally call-in shows or comment shows, so if you would like to join us on air, you can do that easily by joining our Discord server and jumping into the Hangout channel. If I don't see you or whatever, just ping me and we'll get you dragged in. But generally speaking, you can just jump in there and we can start talking about something. But do please try not to interrupt. That's all we ask. Before we get started with tonight's show, a little bit of housekeeping. I will not be streaming next week because I will be on vacation in LA. So if you want to watch somebody else, I suggest you go watch Wick that day. He's a good guy. He's doing I believe he's doing that stream on Thursday next week. And if it's not, then there's other people you can watch, and we'll tell you who they are after we find out who's streaming and not next week. So yeah, we typically do this on Thursdays, but we're going to be taking next week off because I will be on vacation. And yeah, there's not much else to say, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Oh, wrong thing. Video. Oh, it didn't go back. All right. So, what are we going to start with tonight? Well, as we start every week until it's over, we are going to start with updates from the war in Ukraine. So, Russia's war in Ukraine is 1 week into its second year. We begin our report with updates thereof. The New York Times reported on a 3-week battle in southern Ukraine that officials say was the biggest tank battle of the war thus far. The loss of at least 130 tanks and armored personnel carriers in the battle was a stinging setback for Russia. The Russians moved forward in columns and Ukrainians maneuvered defensively, firing from a distance or from hiding places as Russian columns came into their sights. Anti-tank teams hiding in tree lines along the fields and armed with American infrared-guided javelins and Ukrainian laser-guided Stogmin P missiles powered up their weapons. Farther away, artillery batteries were ready. The dirt road had been left free of mines, while the fields were seeded with them, enticing the Russians to advance while preventing tanks from turning around once the trap was sprung. Once the shooting started, the drivers panicked and tried to turn around using the mine-laden shoulder of the road. Blown up vehicles then slowed or stalled the column. At that point, Ukrainian artillery opened fire, blowing up more armor and killing soldiers who climbed out of disabled machines. When the tank battle was over, not only had Russia failed to capture the territory of Vuhledar, it also had made the same mistake that cost Moscow hundreds of tanks earlier in the war, advancing columns into ambushes. Blown up by mines, hit with artillery, or obliterated by anti-tank missiles, the charred hulks of Russian armored vehicles now litter farm fields all about Vuhledar, according to Ukrainian military drone footage. We are going to turn over to that footage now. Please note there is no sound. Oh, it's going to play an ad, isn't it? Dang it. Fine. We'll play that in a second. Let this ad play. All right. Going back over to that video now. Sorry about that, because even though we prep everything, it sometimes likes to still play ads. So as we said, this is a Ukrainian drone capturing this footage of the destruction of this tank or armored personnel carrier. I can't really tell. That's a tank. Those are armored personnel carriers. And you can see that they're in columns, so they're doing 2x2 columns for advance, and they're trying to go around the vehicles, but getting hit by mines as they're trying to maneuver around the area and getting blasted with either javelins, as stated earlier, or artillery. And that's the end of the video. Oh, that was fun. Continuing on, many of the Russians' most elite units were left in shambles in earlier fighting. Those troops were replaced with newly conscripted soldiers with little to no training in Ukraine's proven tactics for ambushing columns. Ukrainian soldiers said they captured a medic who had been reassigned to operate a tank. The Russian army has long boasted of their skills in tank warfare, recalling its victories over the Nazis in World War II. But by last week, Russia had lost so many machines to armored assaults that they changed tactics and resorted only to infantry attacks, according to Ukrainian commanders. Speaking of tanks, the first 4 of 14 Leopard 2 tanks promised by Poland are now in Ukraine and will soon be followed by 60 PT-91s. PT-91 Troggy tanks within a few days, according to the Polish PAP news agency. In other news, battles continue to rage in key eastern stronghold of Bakhmut, according to reporting from The Guardian. Russia's forces continue to make incremental gains and continue to assault the city, according to the Ukrainian military general staff. The head of Russia's Wagner mercenary forces has said Ukrainian forces are putting up furious resistance against Moscow's attempt to seize Bakhmut. Quote, "Tens of thousands of Ukrainian army fighters are putting up ferocious resistance. The bloodiness of the battle is growing by the day," he said in an audio message released by his press service. In other news, the U.S. does not expect Russia to make significant territorial gains in Ukraine in the near term, a U.S. Undersecretary of Defense has said. Describing the front lines as a grinding slog, Colin Kahl told a House of Representatives hearing on Tuesday, quote, "I do not think that there's anything I see that suggests that Russia can sweep across Ukraine and make significant territorial gains anytime in the next year or so." Which makes sense. Both Ukraine and Russia have kind of dug in, and they're in more or less, they're not really engaged in necessarily full-on trench warfare, but they have such fortified defensive positions that there is a clear line of battle being drawn. And it's going to take a lot of military force, both men and in terms of men and equipment, for either side to make any significant gains, at least as of right now. With Ukraine getting tanks in the coming months, that could potentially push forward Ukraine and give the ability of Ukraine to seize territory it has either previously had or additional to what it's captured before. But until those weapons make it to the battlefield, don't expect anything major to happen, unless, of course, we see more interior to Russia attacks on infrastructure, which could change the calculus of battle. In other news, a hacking attack Tuesday caused some regional broadcasters in Russia to put out a false warning urging people to take shelter from an incoming missile attack, the Emergencies Ministry had said. Vladimir Putin told the FSB security services on Tuesday to step up its intelligence activity and stop sabotage groups getting into Russia, which we just mentioned. Putin instructed the agency to strengthen its activity to counter what he described as growing espionage and sabotage operations against Russia by Ukraine and its Western allies. So this has been reporting for the last couple of weeks that have been some incursions into Russia, either by Russian separatists or other groups, possibly even Ukraine special forces, or special forces like troops, whether or not they're directly involved with the government or not is to be determined of how these things are going to keep going along. There was even reporting that a rebel Belarusian group had targeted some of the Russian forces that are inside Belarus as well. Speaking of Belarus, there's additional information coming out of there, where China's President Xi Jinping and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko sealed a series of agreements on Wednesday to build up an, quote, all-weather partnership between their countries. Their meeting in Beijing brought together two of the foreign leaders of whom Russia's President Vladimir Putin is most reliant on for support, according to reporting from Reuters. In a televised comment, Xi said China was keen to strengthen trust and cooperation with Belarus, quote, given the instability and turbulence of the international situation. Lukashenko said that the meeting was taking place, quote, in a very complicated time which demands new unorthodox approaches and responsible political decisions. They must be primarily aimed at preventing an uncontrolled descent into global confrontation, which has no winners. Personally, this sounds to me that China is using this war in order to pull away some direct Russian allies more so into its own orbit. We can see that kind of with the way that China has approached Kazakhstan and other Southeast Asian or East and Southeast Asian countries, dealing with Russia and how it has gone about trying to entice Russia to buy more of its equipment, sell it oil at cheaper prices, and so on and so forth. Whether or not China has the capabilities to actually help Russia, given its own tumultuous economic situation that it's undergoing in its country after trying to pursue a zero COVID policy in order to tamp down on death within China due to its really terrible medical infrastructure, mainly because it's still a developing country. A lot of China is rural. So think about how in America, rural towns do not have as much medical supplies. Well, multiply that by like 500, and that's how China is set up, essentially. But also using zero COVID policy as a way to cement political power under Xi Jinping. So we're going to see China probably continue to talk out of both sides of its mouth when it comes to what it can support Russia in doing and where it wants to see itself within the international order. China has, over the last 30 or 40 years, been very keen on integrating itself within the international order, and rather than trying to blow it all up, kind of steer it towards its own benefit. Creating parallel institutions to get around maybe sanctions for some countries, creating its Belt and Road Initiative to counter U.S. policy within its own import-export bank things that it wanted to do under Obama, being able to resort to soft power in order to get what it needs, which is raw resources at a cheaper price, the ability to export labor out of China to help build up other countries for the good rapport, but also take some of the pressure off of its internal domestic policies because there might not be enough jobs within China to keep everyone employed. And water resources are another thing that is coming up to a thing with China as well as the Middle East to try to ensure that it can feed their own people and keep enough water around for them to stay alive. So all these things together kind of paint the picture of where China is in regards to the war in Ukraine. I don't expect China to necessarily come out and do direct military support for Russia as far as of right now anyways. Some indications point to nationalistic organizations and people within China trying to push China that way in order to flex its own military might, as well as, get more money into the system and get more buyers for its goods. But given what they've said publicly and some of the internal disputes that some people have shown, it is not likely that China, as of right now, like as of today, will actually give them direct weapons. Probably the most that we can see, and this is something that China has said that they are going to do, is provide small drones to Russia to basically counter the small drones that Ukraine is getting from Turkey. But with that said, Beijing has become increasingly vocal in calling for peace as Ukrainian conflict drags on, and denied it would provide arms to Moscow after US officials said China was considering doing so. And the reason that they're saying that is because, in my opinion, they need the global order to come back and be stable in order for them to continue on their 30-year plan. And finally, in other news, the G20 summit is underway this week, bringing together the world's 19 wealthiest nations plus the European Union, accounting for 85% of global economic output and 2/3 of its population. In all, representatives of 40 countries, including non-G20 members invited by India and multilateral organizations, will attend. Reuters reported that the summit takes place in the shadow of Russia's war in Ukraine and spiraling US-Chinese tension, with host India hoping that issues like climate change and third world debt are not overlooked. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is expected to highlight America's efforts to address food and energy security issues affecting developing nations. The U.S. top diplomat also will underscore the damage that Russia's war of aggression has caused and encourage other nations to redouble calls for Russia to end its war in Ukraine. And diplomatic staff arriving for work at the Russian embassy in Germany were greeted with an anniversary gift from Ukraine last Friday, one of their own ruined tanks. And this one's a little bit funny, as you can see this here. This is what Ukraine has delivered to Russian diplomats in Germany. It was a months-long project between a pair of German activists and the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, according to reporting from Business Insider. We'll close our updates on Putin's war on Ukraine with a map that shows the territorial shifts since the invasion through last Friday. That is over here. This, of course, is from the Associated Press. And it's going to play an ad. Why? Yep. Sorry about this, everybody. Like, I have it all prepped. I let the ad play, and it still screws me over. All right, let's go over back to it now. So there's no sound, but you can see how Russia's occupied territory is within the yellow. Ukrainian counteroffensives are coming through, as well as Russian advances in the orange. So let's watch this go now. So we can see this. Russia is coming through Ukraine. This is March of this year, or last year rather. Ukraine is picking up, pushing Russia back into eastern Ukraine along the Kharkiv and Odessa and Zaporizhzhia NPP areas. Russia is trying to make advances, but it's getting thwarted. There is Kharkiv's taking back Kharkiv by Ukraine, taking back near the Odessa region in Khorasan, and coming up to basically this past month, and you can see where the battle lines are fully drawn. So people have suggested that what Russia really wants is to just basically control this entire area and not actually wanting all of Ukraine, even though it's stated that the opposite. It said it wanted to get all of Ukraine and impose a puppet government within Ukraine to carry out its will. But if Ukraine can basically cut off, if they can cut off Crimea from the land bridge here, if they can take this area over basically here, they could pretty much prevent Crimea from getting resupplied, especially since they've easily blown up the bridge that was over here previously, and stopped the connection there. Of course, Russia definitely wants to keep Crimea, And it might be possible that as the war goes on and wanes down and people start pushing for peace, especially with how Europe is structuring itself now, it's possible that maybe Russia will keep Crimea, but nothing like that is for certain as of right now, especially with how Ukraine has conducted the war. But that, my friends, concludes our segment on Ukraine. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on now with the news roundup, getting into some U.S. politics, starting up with the House of Representatives. And as we talked about China with Ukraine, we have to talk about China's relations with the United States, as the tensions are fraught, as there are fraught tensions between the two countries, more or less primarily because as of right now, a lot of pushback from the House of Representatives as far as what China has done in regards to intellectual property in the past, as well as some of the hacking that has happened over the last 2 years, and of course, TikTok. So let's get on with it. So based on reporting from Fox News and ABC News, China lashed out on Wednesday at new House committees dedicated to countering Beijing. China demanded that the committee members discard their ideological bias and zero-sum Cold War mentality. Continuing on, the House of Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party must view China and U.S.-Chinese relations in an objective and rational light, Foreign Ministry spokesman Mao Ning said at a daily briefing. Continuing on, he stated, quote, "We demand the relevant U.S. institutions and individuals discard their ideological bias and zero-sum Cold War mentality. They must stop framing China as a threat by quoting disinformation, stop denigrating the Communist Party of China, and stop trying to score political points at the expense of U.S.-Chinese relations." End quote. So the committee began its work on Tuesday with a prime-time hearing in which its chairman called on lawmakers to act with urgency. The committee framed the competition between the U.S. and China as an existential struggle over what life will look like in the 21st century. When China talks about Cold War mentality, this is what they're talking about. And this is something that a lot of neocons, Republicans, and liberal institutionalists have been pushing for a good 20 years now or so. Because when another nation rises, the one that is the hegemonic power always feels afraid. Continuing on though, China's aggression towards Taiwan, their desire to assert control over the South China Sea, and the recent fight of a suspected Chinese spy balloon over the U.S. have fueled lawmakers' desire to do more to counter Beijing. Testifying to the strengths of those concerns, the 365-65 vote to create the committee was bipartisan, something not often seen on the Hill in recent years. New York Democrat Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, warned against xenophobic activity from MAGA Republicans after the first hearing. China was the subject of intense congressional scrutiny during a total of 7 hearings Tuesday alone. And one of those hearings had to do with TikTok. So let's talk about that now. So this week, the House Foreign Affairs Committee passed a bill that would give President Biden the authority to ban Chinese-owned social media app TikTok and other apps used in the United States. A top Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee opposes the Republican bill, according to reporting from Reuters. Representative Georgie Meeks, Democrat of New York, strongly opposed the legislation, saying it would, quote, "damage our allegiance across the globe, bring more companies into Chinese sphere, destroy jobs here in the United States, and undercut core American values of free speech and free enterprise." In a statement, a representative of TikTok said, quote, "It would be unfortunate if the House Foreign Affairs Committee were to censor millions of Americans and do so based on not on actual intelligence, but on a basic misunderstanding of our corporate structure. adding that it has spent more than $1.5 billion on rigorous data security efforts and rejects spying allegations. Now, we need to talk about this a bit more because I don't personally buy what China's selling here when it comes to TikTok. But I also don't buy the conspiracy theories that have been pushed out by Republicans and Republican pundits, conservative pundits, when it comes to TikTok as a weapon. So let me explain. So on the weapon front, I don't buy this argument, but this is what the argument's being stated. In China, China has TikTok. TikTok exists in China, okay? Or a version of TikTok does anyways. And in that version, China actually really, really cares about what its young people are exposed to on social media. They do things like prevent using TikTok for all hours on end. I think that it's something like maybe an hour a day when you're 15, you can be on TikTok. Like that's like how strict it is. Meanwhile, the United States has no such restrictions. And so a kid can be on TikTok viewing anything that's on TikTok, no matter how messed up it is. And remember, this used to be Musical.ly, so it was pretty dark at the time. No matter what it is. And it is filling kids' brains with junk because we don't censor anything in the United States. To me, this isn't so much an issue with China trying to like meld the minds of young people in the United States. It's more of the United States doesn't have any safeguards when it comes to social media, children rather, using social media, and therefore get exposed to everything and can get anything done, can be exposed to basically anything. So that's one problem. So I think that problem is more of a U.S. policy issue when it comes to internet access and internet websites availability for children. Not so much China trying to do whatever it wants and, influence young minds. With that said, recent reports have indicated that TikTok has a fire or a heater button, basically, where it can be used to say, hey, push this video more in the algorithms. That was discovered. Let's see if I can find that. Let me see if I can find it. So heater button TikTok. Yeah. So this came in from Forbes. Okay. So this came from Forbes, and TikTok's secret heating button can make anyone go viral. Because of course it can. Like any social media application that has an algorithm can make that algorithm change in ways that it wants. And that includes doing things like creating fake virality. Whether or not this is something that Chinese government uses is another story. Personally, what I think is happening here is that this is what all social media has done, I think, throughout entire time. And that is basically people paying for virality, people paying to go viral, and that sort of thing, right? So I think that's what actually is happening here. I think this is a built-in virality manipulation thing in the algorithm that people can pay for, and it's helping make the company money. With that said, there's no reason to fully trust what the Chinese government is saying or the company is saying when it comes to what it can and can't do with that app. So some caution is warranted. But that caution should not be only because of TikTok being owned by the Chinese government. This should be caution across social media in general. It's a thing that everybody should have a little head scratcher and be like, maybe the internet's fake, because it is. And there should be rules and regulations in terms of what data is collected, how long it is saved for, how you can own and control your own data, what privacy measures are put in place to protect you, your loved ones, your children from manipulation, and having truth in advertising. All these things are things that we need as a standard across the entire internet, across the entire social media industry. And I don't think we should just be signaling out TikTok simply because we're worried about the rise of China, because those issues are issues even absent that. Reporting from, analysis from and by people like Jonathan Haidt show that kids are being greatly negatively impacted by their social media consumption. And the TikTok's no different. It's just quicker. Okay. And more people are on it because everybody uses the internet now. Whereas when Facebook came around, not everybody used the internet. Social media was nascent. People, learned to cope with it better. But a kid that was born 10 or we'll say 15 years ago has never in their entire life, for the most part, been in a world where social media didn't exist. And that might be a problem. So we shouldn't fearmonger about China. I think this is a thing that impacts everything, and it's something that we should have regulations and put in place across the entire social media industry. We also should talk a little bit about the fact that Chinese tensions aren't completely unwarranted. Even though the US has been pushing up against China in its growth, there are things that China has done that are against American interest and liberal interest, classic liberalism, whatever you want to call it, interest in the global world order, specifically when it comes to controlling the South China Sea. So China has established, as we've talked about in the past, China established fake islands along the South China Sea in order to project military strength beyond its borders, as well as try to claim territorial exclusive water rights in the South China Sea that actually buttress up against other countries such as Philippines, Singapore, Vietnam, Australia, Japan. Like, these are all problems, because what happens if they are able to assert exclusive economic activity in those areas? Fishing rights get taken away from other countries. The ability for free navigation of international waters is threatened. That means all the goods that basically come from Southeast Asia and go to Southeast Asia could be controlled by the Chinese government, which is a problematic in and of itself, even absent the United States. So it's not unreally, like, it really shouldn't push people, rub people the wrong way when people are like, this is a problem, because it is a problem. That doesn't mean we should raise to the level of military confrontation over it. There should be things that are done that are, step up a little bit of exertion of not force, but of the rights that are established within the current world order. Free navigation exercises, putting together a Southeast Asian counter block to China as far as its military aspirations and hegemonic aspirations within Southeast Asia. These are good things. These things are going to cause tensions. China is wanting to become a regional hegemon, and it really shouldn't be allowed. Like, if it's going to be allowed, if it's going to happen, it should happen in such a way that other people are not negatively impacted by it. And by that, I mean other people in Southeast Asia. Philippines, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Singapore, Korea, etc., etc., etc. All these countries. And that's just the way it is. So one of the things the United States can do is do what it does in South China Sea, which is free navigation exercises, military exercises, etc. And also do things like maybe a new version of TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, in order to counter what China is trying to build over with this Belt and Road Initiative. I think those are things that we actually should care about. And again, these are going to be continuing to happen in the news, so we'll be keeping you informed when things change and providing our opinion as such. But that concludes that segment for Newscast. In additional news coming out of the House of Representatives, we have Republicans to McCarthy January 6th video. What happened? Well, they're basically telling him not so fast. In a follow-up to a reporting from last week, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, provided Fox News infotainment host Tucker Carlson with access to 40,000 plus hours of video from the January 6th insurrection. That was apparently a surprise to most of the members of McCarthy's caucus. This week, Republicans are pushing back, citing privacy and security concerns. Interesting. Privacy and security concerns. Okay. Maybe they're a little worried that Tucker Carlson's going to come for them. Maybe they're a little worried that something might get revealed. Who knows? It's all on the table. And Republicans and Republican leaders are now emphasizing that no clips will be broadcast without prior security clearance. Following days of silence on the topic, House Republicans made clear this week that no information would be released to Carlson's team, let alone broadcasted publicly, before the footage is screened to ensure it doesn't compromise the security of the Capitol complex. So they know exactly what happened on January 6th, and they're scared. So despite all their stuff about how January 6th wasn't a big deal, they're worried that another January 6th could happen, and the videos given to Huckster Carlson, would be used to put them in danger, to use them used against them in political warfare. Makes you think, doesn't it? And for his part, McCarthy said that he expects the security footage to be widely released, though, as soon as possible, but would not predetermine the format of such a release. Representative Barry Loudermilk, Republican of Georgia and chair of the House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight, said that his panel is working on procedures for the review and release of the video footage. Quote, "There hasn't been a release of tapes," Loudermilk said. Continuing on, he stated, "It's basically controlled access to be able to view those tapes. Can't record, can't take anything with you. Then they will request any particular clip that they may need, and then we'll make sure that there's nothing sensitive, nothing classified, like escape routes." Right, nothing sensitive, nothing classified like escape routes. That's the only thing. We already know from previous reporting from last week, from the news, that Fox News has been working with Republicans on everything from all time. This is just more in your face about that. It is what Republicans accuse Democrats of doing with places like the New York Times, Yorker, CNN, MSNBC News, etc. And they just don't want other Republicans coming from them. That's honestly what I believe is happening here. That's what it is. Continuing on, though, McCarthy's decision to share the January 6th footage exclusively with Huckster Carlson has led to accusations that the speaker is simply coddling up to the popular host to save his own political hide. Quote, "The speaker is saying that this is about public accountability and transparency, but that is totally belied by the fact that he gave it to one extreme person in media," said Massachusetts Representative Catherine Clark, the Democratic whip. The choice of Carlson is under additional scrutiny this week following revelations released as part of an ongoing defamation lawsuit against Fox News that he was among the network's pundits furious that Fox had correctly called Arizona for Biden. Remember, Fox News is admitting to lying to you and their viewers about the election. So why believe them on this? Especially the pundit class, which Tucker Carlson is a member of. But that concludes our segment about this. All right. Ooh. All right. In other news, though, we have a bill that is set to pass that will invoke Biden's first veto. According to U.S. News and World Reports, Both the House and Senate this week passed a bill to nullify Labor Department rules allowing retirement plans to be considered environmental, social, and governance, otherwise known as ESG, factors when making investment decisions. Critics says ESG investments allocate money based on political agendas, such as the drive against climate change, rather than on earning the best possible return for savers. The ESG industry, meanwhile, says it helps highlight companies that may be riskier than traditional investing guidelines alone might suggest. Because climate change is going to change the nature of the entire world industry. Things like that. Is there politics into it? Sure. There's politics in any sort of venture fund, for the most part, right? But let's be real. This is capitalists' answer to social governance. Why it's called ESG. And no, don't let people lie to you and tell you this is just Chinese social credit score or a bunch of other bullshit. This is just trying to get more money out of people into other industries by saying, hey, that thing you care about? The environment or social justice or something else, being a good corporate steward for the people. Well, you can invest in these companies that we've identified. And of course, we'll take a little bit off the top. That's all this is. Continuing on, though, it also says using an ESG lens could help investors find better, more profitable opportunities. ESG has become popular across a wide range of investors, from smaller pocketed regular people to pension funds responsible for the retirement of millions of workers. Before risking their money, all investors, including both traditional and ESG ones, look at how much revenue a company is bringing in, how much profits it's making, and what the prospects are for the future. In addition to environmental, social, and corporate governance factors, investors are also pushing executives across corporate America to provide more information about their carbon emissions, measurements about their impacts on human rights, and audits for racial equity. It's all an evolution from the industry's early days when social responsible investing was quite simplistic. Early funds would just promise not to own stocks of tobacco companies, gun makers, and other companies seen as distasteful or politically incorrect. Some politicians have denounced ESG as politicizing investing, but investing has always been politicized. Full stop. You take money and you invest it in a company, you're saying what that company is doing is good, or at least good enough that you don't care about, or at least good enough in other ways. Something fell. All right. Sorry about that. At least good enough in other ways so you don't care about what else they're doing, right? So that's what there's going on here. Always been, investing has not always been just like, I give you $1, you give me back $2. It's not always been like that. What is it? Not political. Venture investors, politically minded investors have always done these things. I mean, hell, that's why Fox News exists. Yeah. Think about that. The only reason Fox News exists is because they saw a marketplace or a place in the market for conservative news be aired 24/7 and be part of the Republican establishment. What else is also invested in? The Koch brothers do a lot of lobbying, do a lot of investing based on their worldview. It's always what it is. It's always what it is. Continuing on, though, some in the business world also have been practically critical of rating agencies that try to boil complex issues down to simple ESG scores. Tesla CEO Elon Musk last year called ESG a scam that has, quote, been weaponized by phony social justice warriors, for example. And of course, the reason why he's saying that is because he doesn't care about labor. He might care about the environment to an extent. He might care about making the best electric vehicle that exists on the planet. But when it comes to labor disputes, he wants to be the boss in charge. And that's why he's pissed off at this. It might be why he's gone full conservative. It might be why he's taken the red pill. Because somebody sued his company for racial discrimination and unfair labor practices. You know, like requiring people to sleep in the office to get a promotion. Just saying, maybe don't be a dick. And after Musk's criticism, Tesla was kicked out of the S&P 500 ESG index. Which, hey, he didn't want to be in there, so hey, toodles. Or he knew it was happening, and so he was mad that he wasn't going to get that sweet, I want to feel better about myself bucks from investors. Yeah. I mean, of course, they're going to tell, like, you think the CEO of a top 500 company isn't going to know when they're going to lose their place in a certain index that's going to make it a little bit harder, maybe, for them to sell their stock to people? Come on. Let's be real. He knew. Of course he knew. Now, Democrats who voted with Republicans to pass the bill are facing tough re-elections in 2024. They include Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and John Tester of Montana. The bill now goes to President Biden's desk, and the president is expected to exercise his veto power for the first time since taking office. As it stands now, there are not enough votes to override the veto. And why wouldn't he veto it? Biden is kind of on board with this. He might have gotten some money. I don't know. Doesn't fucking matter. It lines up with some of the stuff he's doing. And honestly, if you care about a free market, if you care about, you know, capitalism, because Biden is still a capitalist, not a communist, contrary to popular Republican ideas. Why would you want the government saying, you can't invest in these funds? Come on. Freedom of speech, freedom of association. You get the drill. But, you know, anytime something might ramp the Republican style when it comes to enforcing their will on other people, they're going to be against it. And that is what this is. And that concludes this segment. Oh, let me stretch here for a second, man. Yeah. Back's been hurting for the last couple of days. How y'all doing? I know I got some viewers. How are people going out there in TV land right now? Y'all doing all right? Yeah, no, you're doing good. What we got over here? Making sure I'm not missing anybody. No, not missing anybody. All right. Nobody wants to come in and talk to me? Oh, man. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right. But let's continue on, though. And this time, let us go now to the Senate and talk about bipartisan talks around Social Security solvency. What's that about? Let's get into it. So a group of bipartisan lawmakers may have come up with a compromise to address the impending insolvency of Social Security. The reason I put those in quotes is because Social Security shouldn't be considered insolvent. There's millions of ways to fix this that don't require taking money away from anybody or reducing benefits or anything. But, you know, the government can't really get its shit together when it comes to understanding how finances work, and they want to compare it to a household budget, yada, 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 yada. It is a legal fiction that Social Security would ever go insolvent. Government could just borrow money to keep it funding and just make up like 80% of the money that comes into Social Security is from you, and 20% of it's from the general fund or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. They can do anything. They can do a million different things. There's no reason to ever say that it's going to be insolvent, but we are, and we have to report on it. Let's get to it, though. So what legislators are exploring is a sovereign wealth fund, or otherwise known as an SWF, something the United States does not currently have at the federal level, according to Business Insider. Sovereign wealth funds are typically investment funds owned by the government, according to the Federal Reserve. In this case, such investments would be used to fund Social Security payments. That's according to Semaphore, which reported this week that a SWF is being considered by a group of senators led by independent Senator Angus King of Maine and Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana. That's in addition to reports that the group wants to eventually raise the retirement age, which is a cut. Okay. Apparently, Republicans didn't want to cut Social Security. This is a cut. They always lie about that. Okay? They want to raise the retirement age because, well, people are living to the age of 80 now, and Social Security was never designed to keep somebody alive and paid for like 20 years. Never mind the fact that not everybody lives to be 78. The difference between wealth, the person's income, and the time that they live, the jobs that they have, and the time that they live is drastic. A person that breaks their body for their work, their entire lives, doing manual backbreaking labor, working with chemicals maybe, on an oil rig, being exposed to toxic chemicals, maybe just simply having to lift big things up and like drill in mines or whatever, like anything that's like physically intensive, those people are less likely to live to the age of 80 than someone like me that sits pretty in a desk, in an office, in air conditioning, doing stuff on the computer. So, no, stop. Stop, please. Stop trying to cut Social Security. Biden's just going to veto it. What are you going to, you think Trump is going to pass that? The only way you could probably get Trump to do it is if it fucked over Democrats. It's the best plan in the world. We're going to make Social Security solvent by making sure that nobody in New York gets Social Security. That's the only way he'll probably pass something like that. It's so frustrating that they've tried. They booed Biden, saying that, oh, Republicans want to cut Social Security. He said some Republicans, not all of you. And here we are, 2 weeks later, or it feels like 2 weeks later, talking about this again. And lo and behold, oh, we're going to raise the retirement age of 70, Social Security. That's 5 years of cut benefits. Fuck out of here with that nonsense. Back to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, though. So the potential of the Sovereign Wealth Fund depends on its stock market success, as it usually does. Semaphore reports that senators are agreeable to an increase in the payroll tax rate and the amount of income subject to those taxes if the fund's returns fall short of expectations. So they're going, what? I don't know if y'all can hear that, but it is super windy by my house. So if I suddenly drop out, that's because power went out or something. It's super windy right now. But we're going to chug along. Chug along. All right, hold on a second. Just making sure. Checking the weather real quick. Making sure there's not a tornado warning. Austin weather. Don't worry, this will be cut and post. Severe one. Okay, so it's still on a severe. Yeah, okay. We're still on a severe thunderstorm watch. So, okay, not too bad. Not too bad. Anyways. Where was I? Yes. So they're talking about potentially cutting Social Security taxes or something, or saying, oh, if it doesn't generate enough returns, we're going to raise Social Security taxes. It's nonsense. There's no reason to do this. Now, I do believe that the United States should have a sovereign wealth fund. I don't think it should be used to fund Social Security necessarily. Maybe it could be used to give everyone an American citizen or resident dividend. The United States could own 10% of every single company that sells that's on the stock market, and that 10% just, hey, here's your sovereign wealth fund payment for being a good resident of the United States. Here you go, resident, citizen, whatever. I don't care where the cutoff is. I'm not really too concerned. Here you go. You've been a good citizen. Here's some money. Oh, you're in jail. You don't get it. Like that's the only thing. Or you're in prison. You don't get it. People in jail should probably still get it. Or people in jail awaiting trial should probably still get it, I should say. But yeah, like that could be cool. It could be cool. Maybe everybody that's born in the United States gets a dividend. It's a baby bond or something. These are good ideas. But they're trying to attach it as a way to mask over the fact that they want to cut Social Security benefits. All the time. Everybody's got nonsense. Nonsense. But we have to continue on. So the goal is for Social Security to be solvent for at least another 75 more years. Semaphore reported that a federal sovereign wealth fund would potentially receive an initial investment of $1.5 trillion or more. If that initial influx of cash doesn't see at least an 8% return, which honestly is pretty much the return rate of the S&P 500 index, so it shouldn't be too hard, the plan would allow raising the minimum taxable income and payroll tax rate ceilings. In other words, so right now there is raising the maximum taxable income and payroll taxes. So right now, I believe if you make over $150,000, so your $150,000 is not taxed for Social Security. I believe that's the cutoff. It's somewhere around there. So they should just do that anyways. It should be all income, just taxed, whatever. I know this maximum amount of money tax is kind of stupid, in my opinion. But that's where it's at. And they also want to raise on the lower end too, so everybody. So the current system, should have read a little further in. But yes, it's actually $160,200 in earnings. And many Democrats have called for changing that cap. So actually $160,200 is the cap. For their part, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and a few other Democrats have championed lifting the cap, with incomes over $250,000 being subjected to payroll taxes. Warren and Sanders reintroduced that legislation just this month. There's evidence that shows that government-run investment funds can be successful. In a state-run sovereign wealth fund in Alaska, for instance, residents receive an annual disbursement from the government that works as a guaranteed income program funded by Alaska-owned oil companies. Residents typically receive as much as $2,000 a year and as low as $800 in years with lower gas prices. A 2016 study by the University of Alaska showed that the fund reduced poverty by up to 20%. Sovereign wealth funds also exist in Scandinavian countries, used to fund various social welfare programs. The Saudis have, and pretty much anybody in the Gulf states, as well as Qatar, have sovereign wealth funds as well. They use to fund infrastructure projects. That's why you see these giant buildings going up everywhere in the Middle East with like these really highly paid, elaborate designs of architecture that just look gorgeous, because they're taking their oil money and shoving it into these projects to, buy goodwill, do other things, look like they're improving as a nation, blah, blah, blah. So a sovereign wealth fund can be used for many different things. And I honestly believe the United States should have one. I just don't know if we should use it to fund exclusively Social Security. And I also don't want to see Social Security be seen as welfare rather than a guaranteed benefit because people paid into it. But as this moves along, we will be sure to inform you of the happenings within the Senate on this, like we usually do. So be sure to check us out for those. That concludes the segment. In positive news that I'm sure everybody can agree with that watches this program, and people that even don't watch this program that I'm political foes with, can agree that this is good because the Senate is seeming to move to end forever war authorization. So a Senate committee will once again consider legislation next week that would repeal 2 authorizations for past wars in Iraq in a renewed push to reassert congressional role in deciding to send troops into combat. Let me read that again because I had the burps. A Senate committee will once again consider legislation next week that would repeal 2 authorizations for past wars in Iraq in a renewed push to reassert congressional role in deciding to send troops to combat. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee will take up the 1991 and 2000 authorization for the use of military force, or AUMF, And Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, said, quote, "We need to put the Iraq war squarely behind us and for all. And doing that means we should extinguish the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with," Leader Schumer said, according to U.S. News and World Reports. Democratic and Republican lawmakers from the Senate and the House of Representatives introduced legislation to repeal the two longstanding AUMFs in early February. Congress has said for many years that too much authority is invested in the president in matters involving sending troops into combat because of broad, open-ended war authorizations. Remember, the authorized use of military force in 2001, in 1991, and in 2002 were used to justify all manner of things, not just the Iraq war. So that's why repealing these authorized use of force, military force, is important. And these are where anti-war activists should be kind of at. Everybody should agree with this. Really, they should agree with removing these. They should probably agree with addressing the War Powers Doctrine, the War Powers Act, and the doctrine that's been read legally to assert more congressional control over that as well. There are things that presidents can do even without authorization from Congress due to that as well. And these are things that I'm sure Republicans and many Democrats, if not most, and some, at least some Republicans, especially among the more populist Republicans, at least for now anyways, can get on board with. So under the Constitution, though, Congress, not the president, has the right to declare war. But the measure's chances of becoming law remain unclear. Members of Congress have been divided over whether it's better for national security to let the AUMF stand, leaving it to military commanders to decide how to fight America's enemies, or insisting that new AUMFs pass before old ones end. Previous repeal efforts have not succeeded, although some have made it through committees or passed by one chamber of Congress. And it kind of depends on what the president is doing and who's in charge. The outpower since Bush has been pushing for a repeal of these authorizations of military force, while the in-power group of people have been kind of trying to protect it. And of course, these things can also be more probably vetoed as well. So, yeah, actually, I have to look that one up. Don't quote me on that one. I'm going to cut that out. But yeah, this is a sticky widget, as they say. And we need to have a Congress that has the gumption, the cojones, the ovaries, as one is, to ensure that the presidents don't do not abuse their authority for declaring military operations, like Putin's doing, and also reassert its authority to ensure that only Congress declares war. But that concludes that segment of the news roundup. And we have more to cover. We have a lot more to cover. So let us continue on. Let us continue on. And I'm sure you heard my dog in the background. That was Summer. Summer is the small little terrier dog that I have. I think you've seen some pictures. Let's see if I can find. You know what? I don't have pictures on my computer, so I can't pull them up right now. But they're cute little doggos. And if you watched the dog walking videos that I put on YouTube, or little shorts, or Instagram, wherever you get them, you've seen my dogs. They're cute little dogs. They don't like the storm though, so they're probably a little antsy right now. Anyways, let's continue on with the news roundup. And now we are going to talk about DC criminal code changes standing. So Axios reported this afternoon that President Biden told Senate Democrats he will not veto a Republican resolution to block changes that the DC Council made to the city's criminal code, which reduces maximum penalties for some violent crimes. Biden's remarks clear the way for the resolution, which is expected to pass the Senate with bipartisan support to take effect, making the first time Congress overturns a DC law in over 3 decades. The Senate could advance the measure overturning the criminal code reform as soon as next week. Now remember, the reason this is possible is because Congress has strict jurisdiction over DC as part of the federal government's powers being written into the Constitution to protect itself from state interference. And so Congress gets to control the city of DC and the rules therein. There's been, changes about how those rules can be done, if they can be overturned, blah, 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 depending on like who's in charge or what have you. But ultimately, Congress has the final say for a myriad of things that DC does. And this is just one of them. And we can talk about whether DC should be a state. I believe it should be a state. Maybe Congress can, control just its interior, basically have a special exclusion zone where all the government buildings are, essentially. But this is them exerting their authority for a variety of reasons. January 6th being one of them, and also the fact that crime has gone up since the pandemic started, and that freaks a lot of people out. Not that it shouldn't freak people out. I'm not saying it shouldn't. Anytime crime goes up, people are going to get more scared. Whether or not these changes actually address that problem, though, is another story. Let's continue on, though. So Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, told Axios he plans to vote for the resolution. And independent senator from Maine, Angus King, said he is likely to vote as well, putting it on track to pass. Congress has final authority over the Capitol. Since reclaiming control of the House, Republicans are ushering in a new era of intervention into D.C., where local Democrats have long sought greater autonomy. The refusal of Biden, a statehood supporter, to break out the veto pen marks a low point in the district's self-governance. It also a departure from last month, when his administration released statements of opposition to overturning the criminal code reform and another resolution that would block non-citizens from voting in local D.C. elections. Republicans and moderate Democrats, including Manchin and Mayor Muriel Bowser, have criticized the criminal code reform for reducing some maximum penalties for violent crimes. Supporters, meanwhile, point out the bulk of the legislation modernizes and updates an archaic criminal code. As changes to those come in, we will be sure to keep you updated on the facts, and we'll give a little more deeper dive because we like to cover criminal justice reform on this, and that's part of what this is. We have a 3-part series, in fact, on our YouTube channel. You can probably see them up here later, where we cover a variety of criminal justice reforms that show promise and actually do help reduce crime, as well as make people safer. Check those out. And finally, from the Senate, though, we have Democrats down by 2 senators, which is a big, bad thing that happened. So why is that? Well, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania has been hospitalized for depression at Walter Reed, and Senator Dianne Feinstein is back in California dealing with an undisclosed health issue. The Democrat numbers has narrowed to 49 for the foreseeable future. We'll keep you posted as those change. A lot of Republicans are saying that, Fetterman should never have been elected. He should have dropped out. He's being pushed, controlled, whatever. Okay. What he experienced was a stroke, and that stroke has had an impact on him. And many stroke victims suffer from depression as they recover from their strokes because the recovery can be slow and not inherently debilitating, but very frustrating to not being able to be back to the 100% if you were. Even if your brain is fully functioning as far as cognitively speaking, that doesn't mean that you're able to articulate those positions, and it's frustrating. It should be obvious. So when those things happen, we'll keep you updated as whenever it's going on. And there's the thunder. All right. So now let us go now to SCOTUS, because there's a lot of stuff that we need to talk about when it comes to SCOTUS. And of course, what we're talking about is the student loan forgiveness programs that have been challenged in the Supreme Court by various Republican governors and state legislatures and other groups as well. So student loans was a topic in oral arguments before the nation's highest court this week. We're going to turn over now to SCOTUS blog to give in-depth but succinct details about those those hearings, as well as what some of the arguments were. Our good friend Nate Dallin said that the government had argued the case very well, and he is very surprised how prepared the government was. The government being Joe Biden, arguing in favor of student loan forgiveness. And it is really a toss-up, despite what you might hear. It's a toss-up on whether or not these forgiveness loans will stand. But let's turn over to SCOTUS blog to hear what they have to say, because SCOTUS blog does a really good job. Let's get to it.
Up at the Supreme Court tomorrow. Student loans are up at the Supreme Court tomorrow in a pair of cases that will impact millions of borrowers. If you have student loans, you may want to tune in to oral argument at 10 a.m. at the Supreme Court tomorrow morning.
I did not have student loans. I've paid those off, but I still think that they should be forgiven. So let's talk.
Over whether Biden's student loan debt forgiveness program is legal or not. I'm going to go through the arguments on both sides, but some background first. The Biden administration relied on the HEROES Act to cancel up to $10,000 or $20,000 in federal loans for certain borrowers. The HEROES Act was passed after 9/11, and it gives the Secretary of Education the power to respond to a national emergency by waiving or modifying statutory or regulatory provisions that govern student loan programs so that borrowers are not worse off financially because of the emergency.
Yep. So Congress gave the Secretary of Education, the Department of Education, I should say rather, broad authority to do things in cases of an emergency to lessen a burden on whether or not they can pay their loans or not. The arguments are for it is like, well, this is an emergency. We can, release the burden from people by forgiving $10,000 in loans due to the pandemic or what have you. Whereas some of the Republicans are going to say, no, this is not intended as a law, even though it wasn't explicitly forbidden by the law to do. That's where it's at, basically.
Here, Biden says the COVID pandemic is the national emergency that gives the Secretary of Education this authority to cancel student debt. The court's going to hear two different challenges to the program tomorrow, one from a group of Republican states attorneys general, the other from a pair of borrowers out of Texas. Remember, while all this is happening,
the borrower argument is kind of scuffed. It's basically saying, oh, I paid my loans back, so I'm burdened by having to pay other people's loans as well through taxes. It's stupid.
The program is still on hold because of a lower court order, and the Supreme Court decided to keep it that way in a December emergency order. So tomorrow, before the court even gets to the merits of the plan, they're going to look at whether the challengers actually even have the right to be in court. To sue in America, you have to show that you have standing. Here, that means the parties are going to have to show that they have been harmed by the plan that isn't in effect yet.
I would say that, honestly, the Texas plaintiffs don't have standing. I don't know how the Supreme Court's going to rule on that, but I don't think they do.
If you have multiple plaintiffs, you just have to show that one of them has standing. So the states argue that Missouri has standing because it creates and controls one of the largest holders and servicers of student loan debt in the country. By eliminating debt for nearly half of all borrowers,
it's going to materially impact the state of Missouri due to lack of jobs and other bullshit.
The states say that could cost Missouri millions of dollars.
Stupid.
Biden says that's really speculative harm and not enough for standing. The states also argue that the program will reduce tax revenues. For the two individual borrowers, one is not eligible for relief because her debt is held by commercial lenders. The other is eligible for $10,000 in relief, but not $20,000 because he didn't receive a Pell Grant. Biden argues they don't have standing because even if they win, they don't get any debt relief, and they would just block everyone else from getting it. We're going to need a part two for the merits arguments.
All right, so we're going to go over to part two.
Part two of student loans at the Supreme Court tomorrow. These are the arguments you'll hear from both sides.
Now, it should be stated that the arguments have already been heard. This is going to talk about the arguments, and then we're going to have the update in the last video. Just wanted to make sure that that's clear on what's going on here. Also got to turn this up.
Sides. Go to part one if you want more background on the case. Biden says he has the authority to relieve the debt under the HEROES Act. That gives the Secretary of Education pretty broad authority to respond to a national emergency by either waiving or modifying any statutory or regulatory provision that's governing student loan programs so that borrowers aren't worse off financially because of the national emergency. Trump used the same law to pause student loan payments during the COVID pandemic, and Biden continued it. The states who are suing to challenge the program say Biden can't do that. They argue that the program violates something called the Major Questions Doctrine. That basically means that when Congress gives the president or one of his agencies the power to do something, they have to be really clear and specific about that designation of power. So this
is bullshit. The idea that Congress, it's basically saying Congress can't delegate authority. Carte blanche. It's a legal theory that basically says that because of separation of powers, Congress can't abdicate its authority in all manners, or pretty much any manner, at least in a major way. And that's what they're making the argument.
The states say that the HEROES Act does not clearly give Biden the authority to relieve $430 billion of student loan debt. Quite the contrary, they point to Congress in 2020 specifically rejecting a provision that would have discharged up to $10,000 in student loan debt per borrower. Now, Biden, reading the same law, says it's perfectly clear he has the power to do this because the HEROES Act specifically gives the Secretary of Education the power to waive or modify laws governing student loans. The states also argue that the Biden administration acted arbitrarily and capriciously, which basically means that the courts look at whether the agency acted reasonably. The individual borrowers who have also filed a challenge argued that the Biden administration didn't jump through all the procedural hoops that you're supposed to when there's a major plan like this.
The two borrowers in question, Lily, this is really an ideological argument that is being that is using legal standing, legal arguments to try to justify its ideological stance. This is not really a law thing. You can make the law thing with, forgiving all student loans, but as far as forgiving some student loans in order to make people whole or what have you, especially during an emergency, because Congress didn't give many guardrails to it, there's arguments to be made that that Biden can do this. They should, if they care about this, right? Congress should just simply pass a law to clarify what can and cannot be done in the HEROES Act in an emergency. That would be the correct stance to do. They're trying to avoid that because it's a political question that's going to cause people pain. So they're trying to use the courts to be like, well, Congress didn't mean to do that, even though the fact that Congress did do it,
including not providing a period of time for the public to provide comment and feedback. Biden says the HEROES Act is exempt from those requirements. And does it matter that Biden is about to announce the end of the COVID pandemic in May? Well, we'll see tomorrow. But the White House insists that even without a national emergency, it still has the power to cancel student loan debt, because even though the formal declaration of the national emergency ends in May, the economic effects of the pandemic will be felt for a long time.
And, there might be some argument for that. So if an emergency ends, then maybe the Supreme Court might, punt and basically say, no, you can't do that because you're ending the emergency. However, the change was done during the emergency. And so what? You're going to say that you can't do it now because the emergency is over, even though the change was implemented during the emergency? I don't buy that argument either. Now, I do think the Congress should ultimately pass a $50,000 or more forgiveness on student loans, because student loans shouldn't exist. They shouldn't exist. The government should not be loaning people money to go to school. Schools should be just seen as a necessary part of modern economic life, and therefore a person should be able to go to school without paying any money out of pocket, including having to rely on the generosity of others. This is just something the United States should do for its own benefit and its benefit of its people. So yeah, Congress should get off its ass and actually do something about it. Given the ideological makeup of Congress, it's not likely to happen, but that's where I am from a moral standpoint. But let's get over to the arguments. the Supreme Court heard now. Also from SCOTUS blog. Hold on.
It was a hot bench in the student loan cases at the Supreme Court this morning. I was there for nearly 4 hours of oral argument, and I think this is one of those times it's worth taking it justice by justice. Let's go. Let's start with the chief. Justice Roberts emphasized the size of the program several times. Remember, Biden just...
Okay, so before we get into this, I'm going to go ahead and rewind this just a smidge. So before we get into this, I want to state that what I thought that Roberts was going to do prior to the arguments, and honestly what it might still turn on those, is whether or not he and some of the other justices agree that the president should have the authority to also use this power in terms of tax avoidance forgiveness. Congress is also designated and has at times forgiven back paid taxes of people that if they paid only like 3% of their owed taxes, then they are forgiven of any other money paid out. That program is legally justified in a similar way as this one is. So maybe they're going to rule that way. I don't know. It's a concern, but let's get back into it.
Several times. Remember, Biden justifies the program times. Remember, Biden... Let's start with the chief. Justice Roberts emphasized the size of the program several times. Remember, Biden justifies the program under the HEROES Act. That's a law that was passed after 9/11 that empowers the Secretary of Education to either waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provisions governing student loan programs during an emergency so that borrowers are not worse off financially. So Roberts said, we're talking $500 billion and 43 million Americans here.
No.
How does that fit under the normal understanding of modifying? Roberts also said the case reminds him of when Trump tried to act on his own to block the Dreamers program, but the court blocked that effort.
That's interesting. Man, Roberts is a very weird guy when it comes to legal stuff. Yeah, Roberts basically, honestly, I think Roberts is playing politics from the bench a lot. And that, like, because Trump, legally speaking, should have had the authority to remove the Dreamer stuff from a legal perspective, from a congressional delegation of powers, from a executive function aspect. But Roberts didn't agree with it. So, it's not political though, right?
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Justice Kagan said Congress really couldn't be any clearer here. Oftentimes, the court does have to grapple with vague language, but this isn't one of them, she said. Waive or modify, and the Secretary of Education can add conditions and terms as he sees fit. Congress doesn't get much clearer than that, she said. Justices Alito and Gorsuch, and later Kavanaugh and Roberts, asked about the fairness principles of the program, pointing to people who had already paid off their loans or...
I'm one of those people that have already paid off their loans. I don't care. Sometimes investments don't work out. Sometimes they do. That's what education is. That's what student loans are, right? So...
or didn't take on loans or chose not to attend college because they couldn't afford it. Chief Justice Roberts posed a hypo comparing someone who took on student loans to someone who chose not to go to college but took out a private loan to start a landscaping business. Roberts asked if the program was fair because the college graduate gets his loans forgiven, whereas the landscaping business owner does not.
Okay, so if you want to make that stupid-ass fairness argument, PPP loans. How many of those were forgiven during the pandemic? Eat my whole ass. Solicitor
General said the landscaping business owner is outside the purview of the Secretary of Education and that he only has clear authority to act when it comes to student loan programs. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson pointed to other benefits programs that were doled out during the pandemic that went to other individuals, corporations, nonprofits that also may have similar fairness issues. Justice Sotomayor chimed in that there is inherent unfairness in our society because our society is not one of unlimited resources. Justice Amy Coney Barrett focused on the standing issue, as did many of the other justices. It was a tough argument for the individual borrowers to show they had standing, but a number of the justices seemed open to the states being able to jump through the hoop. Justice Thomas looked at the language of the statute, which says the Secretary of Education can waive or modify statute or regulations pertaining to student loans, but it doesn't say cancellation. Thomas pressed on how a waiver or modification
That's such a literalist. Okay.
amounts to a cancellation, and Kavanaugh later echoed this sentiment, saying it cuts against the government's argument. Overall, the conservative justices were skeptical of the program, and the liberal justices seemed to think it was a permissible use of congressionally delegated authority.
All right. Well, you know where I stand on this. I stand on the fact that I think the government there shouldn't be student loans. They should be forgiven. I stand on the fact that, during an emergency, forgiving the debt should be fine. Not forgiving all of it, mind you. I do think that exceeds the congressional authority of it. Similar arguments that they're making for any of it, to be honest. But honestly, the 10,000 burden, think of it this way. This is an easy way to think it. The case, it rests on whether or not a person is made worse off during the emergency to pay back a government loan. If the loan is simply on pause and accruing interest, right, then that does make it to where they are going to be worse off. So the government paused the loans and waived interest, right? Also, if during the pandemic, the people are negatively impacted by it due to loss of work and income, then that pausing does not make them better. The pausing makes them worse off simply because of the nature of the emergency, right? Because then they have to pay it back anyways. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it will turn on the whole thing with the worse off and the forgiveness thing. I don't know. I just think the authority. I agree with the liberal justice on this. The authority is vested for this. Call it my bias. I don't care. And I just don't really have a care for the student loans in themselves. So, but we'll see. And we'll tell you when that happens, expecting the ruling to come out around July or so. So that concludes our segment on the Supreme Court. So now we're going to move on to news bites. News bites don't fit neatly into a certain sector of government, Congress, the executive branch, whatever, but they run the political gamut. And this week's no different. In fact, it goes from maddening to bizarre. So let's start off with a story that's a little bit of both. And this week we're talking about Mississippi land grab or regression to Jim Crow. What's this about? Well, let's go ahead and get into it. So reporting from Mississippi Today relates that a white supermajority of the Mississippi House voted to create a separate court system and expand police force within the city of Jackson, the blackest city in America, that would be appointed completely by white state officials. Jackson, Mississippi has been a black majority city for a very long time. The overwhelmingly white majority of the legislature has shat on Jackson for a very long time, has tried to make special rules to keep Jackson controlled, and this is continuing in that vein. So if House Bill 1020 becomes law later this session, the white Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court would appoint 2 judges to oversee a new special district within that city, one that includes all the city's majority white neighborhoods, among other areas. Separate and equal, right? Sure. The white state attorney general would appoint 4 prosecutors, a court clerk, and 4 public defenders for this new district. The white state public safety commissioner would oversee an expanded Capitol Police force run concurrently by a white chief police officer. They're essentially trying to create another city, another jurisdiction, another legal entity to separate the black majority of Jackson from the rest of the outlying areas that are incorporated in Jackson's jurisdiction. This has happened before. It happened with school districts in the area. It's like they really don't want integration still in 2023. It is also being done to limit the power and authority of black politicians in the area. That much should be clear. So the appointment by state officials would occur in lieu of judges and prosecutors being elected by the local residents of Jackson and Hindus County. Judges and prosecutors are elected by local residents in every other municipality and county in the state. In Mississippi, everywhere else, it's elected. They're going to appoint it here because they don't trust the residents to make their own decisions. Mississippi capital is 80% black and home to a higher percentage of black residents than any major American city. Mississippi legislature is thoroughly controlled by white Republicans who have redrawn districts over the last 30 years to ensure they can pass any bill without a single Democratic vote. Mississippi, you're doing me a negative, bro. You're doing me a negative. Mississippi legislature, every legislative Republican is white and most Democrats are black. Quote, only in Mississippi would we have a bill like this, where we say solving the problems requires removing the vote from black people. Representative Ed Blackmun, a Democrat from Canton, said while pleading with his colleagues to oppose the measure. Blackmun, a civil rights leader with decades-long history of championing voting issues, equated the current legislation to the Jim Crow era of 1890 Constitution that was written to strip voting rights from black Mississippians. Quote, this is just like the 1890 Constitution all over again, Blackmun said from the floor. We are doing exactly what they said they were doing back then, helping those people because they can't govern themselves. And that there's really no other way to view this. There isn't. You're going to have a special process. You're going to have special judges, special police officers, special people that are picked by the governor or the legislature in lieu of a popular vote that exists everywhere else in Mississippi. You're taking away agency. You're being undemocratic. For what purpose? This is one of those instances where the impacts of racism are on full display, even if no one wants to admit that they're just being racist. When we talk about systemic issues, systemic racism, it's stuff like this that we're talking about. Continuing on, quote, this bill is designed to make our capital city of Jackson, Mississippi, a safer place, said Republican Representative Trey Lamar, citing numerous news sources who have covered Jackson's high crime rates. Quote, continuing on, he stated, quote, my constituents want to feel safe when they come home. Lamar said, adding the capital city belongs to all citizens of the state. When I'm coming from this, where I'm coming from with this bill is to help the citizens of Jackson and Hindus County. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because if you were, there wouldn't be things like, wait, wasn't it Mississippi? Wasn't Jackson the place that got Jackson, Mississippi water, right? Yeah. That's, you want to help them? You didn't even help fix their water system. Fuck out of here, dude. You're talking about safety and the water system is just garbage because the state didn't want to put money into it, preventing Jackson from levying taxes on businesses in the city in order to pay for the infrastructure needed to keep people safe and their drinking water safe for consumption. And you want to talk about safety? Eat my fucking ass. You're full of shit, and everybody needs to call you out on this fucking shit. Bro, I know, like, I know that we still have issues with racism in the United States, clearly, But Mississippi rather is taking it to a whole new level with this nonsense. It is things like this that give credence to separatism. Separatism is cringe, but when shit like this happens, what is the fucking alternative? People that have watched this program before know that I've mentioned this, but there was a movement among libertarians to take over a state to create their own libertarian utopia, right? And some black people have urged black people to return to South, particularly in Georgia, in Atlanta, to do the same thing. And the reason why they're doing that stuff is because of shit like this. It's fucking asinine. And we're going to talk about more separatism later because it's bullshit. Continuing on, opponents of the legislation, dozens of whom have protested at the Capitol several days this year, accuse the authors of carving out mostly white, affluent areas of the city to be put in a new district, which is true. That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to separate the wealth and income from the rest of the city, right? And they're basically going to try to incorporate another township. This is one of the first steps of doing so. If we have a new district with new cops and people in charge and it's safer, then maybe we can justify having a new incorporated city. It's bullshit. It's just more ways to keep the people in Jackson poor, destitute, and reliant. Or not even reliant, because they didn't even want to help them. What am I saying? Poor and desperate. That's it. And not only that, though. Not only that, right? We know that Jackson has a problem with poverty and funding for its police force, for its water system, for its utilities, everything. Funding in Jackson is atrocious because of numerous different things. But this bill would double the funding of the special district to $20 million in order to increase the size of the existing Capitol Police Force. Are you fucking kidding me? And the reason why this is even especially atrocious is because this police force has received broad criticism from Jacksonians for shooting several people in recent months with little to no accountability. Not only that, but the new court system laid out in House Bill 1020 is estimated to cost $1.6 million annually. That money, that $20 million, that $21.6 million being dedicated to this new special district to give some people like some air of security could be better spent in actually tackling the root causes of crime. When people talk about defunding the police, they're talking about shit like this. This is a clear example of systemic racism. I don't know how else to describe it. You want to talk, people want to come at me and talk about how there's no proof of systemic racism. You have to actually have like full on like, oh, we're racist and we're writing this law to be racist. No. The impacts of this law are inherently racist. Ergo, it is systemic racism. For their part, though, Democratic members of the House said that if they wanted to help with the crime problem, the legislature could increase the number of elected judges in Hindus County. I don't know what you mean by that, Liberty Twitcher. You might want to restate. Oh, disproportionately. Yeah. Okay, never mind. I just misread it wrong. Yeah, to a degree, I agree. So Liberty Twitcher said, quote, proof of systemic racism is the fact that people of color are disproportionately arrested and jailed. Yes, I agree. I just misread your comment, so appreciate it. And they're right. The Democrat members of the House are right that if they want to help with the crime problem, allow the court system to do its job and do it faster by hiring more judges. Don't create a special court system outside of this county's control simply because you don't trust the people to vote for in your state's interest. So Blackmon said Hindis County was provided 4 judges in 1992 when a major redistricting occurred, and the number has not increased since then, even as caseloads for 4 judges has exploded. In other words, they're not giving the funding to actually hire more judges, elect more judges, do more court cases, and so people are left to sit in jail or left on their own recognizance because they don't have the ability to quickly process cases, and thus increasing crime in general. Republicans are saying a lot about bail reform and how that's not good and we're letting criminals out. And meanwhile, in Jackson, in Mississippi, they're not giving enough people in order to actually process cases. This is nonsense. $21.6 million to double the police force for extra special protection and $1.6 million more for a special court system outside the control of the citizens, the residents of Jackson, is just stupid. We can talk about whether more police reduce crime. That is a fair thing to talk about. But doing it in this way, to where they create a special district simply to carve out the black majority, is racism. Full stop. Jesus. But that concludes our segment about that. Jackson. Does it? I don't know, man. Yeah, that concludes our segment. There's nothing else to really be said about it. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on with another segment. Let me calm down a little bit. All right. Taking it back. So we got, this one's a little bit weird, all right? And this one is about a fetus of an inmate seeks release from jail. What's this about? Well, let's talk about it. So a lawyer is attempting to have a pregnant woman released from jail ahead of trial with the argument that her fetus has been subject to unlawful and illegal detention. The new one. The case could have profound consequences for the rights of women in Florida. Attorney William M. Norris filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus on behalf of the unborn child of Natalie Hale in Florida's 3rd District Court of Appeals on February 15th. The Miami Herald first reported. I'll reread that. So, Attorney William M. Norris filed a petition of writ of habeas corpus on behalf of an unborn child, Natalie Harrell, in Florida's 3rd District Court of Appeals on February 15th, the Miami Herald first reported. The filing argues that the fetus is, quote, a person under the Florida Constitution and the United States Constitution, and therefore has the right to due process. Quote, the unborn child has not been charged with a criminal offense by respondents of the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, yet respondents have the unborn child in detention center in Miami-Dade County, Florida, the filing states. Harrell, 24, was 6 weeks pregnant when she was arrested last July 26 and charged in connection with the death of a woman during an argument in an Uber on July 23rd. Harrell was pled not guilty and has been held without bail since her arrest, according to The Guardian. It should be noted that Norris represents only the fetus in this case, not Harrell herself. Quote, an unborn child is a person, Norris told NBC News. The person has constitutional rights, and one of them is the right not to be deprived of liberty without due process of law. Fetal personhood laws are a key aim of the anti-abortion movement in the United States following the U.S. Supreme Court's striking down Roe v. Wade last summer. A spokesperson for Pregnancy Justice said in a statement that the fetal personhood movement has moved from fringe idea to codified law across the country, adding, quote, While their goal is to stop abortion and control people's bodily autonomy, they've given little thought to how it impacts all aspects and all facets of the law beyond abortion. There's no telling where this will end. High occupancy vehicle lanes, taxes, workers' compensation, child custody, kidnapping cases, criminal law, and on, they said. Now, this is an actually interesting thing. If a person gets into an argument, a woman that is pregnant gets into an argument with their spouse, baby daddy, what have you, and they leave, well, is that a kidnapping case? Could be. Under personhood arguments for unborn fetuses. Could be that. The high occupancy vehicle lane, I think, is a little, whatever. Who cares about that? But taxes, that's another one. Do we start including including federal tax breaks for pregnant women? As soon as they find out they're pregnant, they can start claiming their kid on their taxes. That's an interesting one. I think many conservatives would say yes to that. Honestly, I think a lot of liberals would probably say yes as well, if not for the abortion argument, because that has legal ramifications in and of itself. But that's an interesting one, right? So these are interesting cases. And this one, this lack of due process for the fetus is interesting. It might be a troll case. I don't know why this particular person, this William M. Norris, is arguing in favor of this. But that's the ramifications of changing the law and the way that you've changed it. All in the hopes of making abortion illegal. Never mind the myriad of other complications this has caused, from people in Texas being denied care for themselves to ensure that they have a productive life. And I'm not even talking about, elective abortions. I'm talking about abortions to save the life of the mother or of a twin fetus or other things. Ending an ectopic pregnancy, vacating a dead fetus from the body. The laws were written in a very poor way, and it endangers everyone, or every pregnant person when they have this issue. Some more than others because of how the medical system is set up. And there was not a seam of care about any of it. So these are what the ramifications are. And we're going to have to deal with this for some time, either until abortion is made totally illegal or made totally legal. Because that needle's not going to be thread very well, I don't think. So yeah, that's where we are. But that concludes our segment about this weird fetus case. Now let us talk about CPAC. CPAC happens every year, Conservative Political Action Committee. And it's time again. And MAGA extremism is on full display once again, because that's kind of where the Republican Party is. So here is Representative Scott Perry, Republican of Pennsylvania, on his hopes and dreams for the Republican majority in the House. So we're going to turn over to C-SPAN now to watch that clip, because it's a...
Look, if it's up to me, there's
a clip. Let's... Hold on. Let's get this big. You can see it. All right. Yeah, we're good. All right.
Of the government, and as Ralph has said, we are going to...
Hold on. It's not turned up. Sorry. There it is. Oh, okay. I gotta turn it up on my end for everything. There we go. All right, we'll start that over.
Of the government, and as Ralph has said, we are going to create a firestorm. Look, if it's up to me, there's going to be a firestorm. These leftists, these Marxists that have prevailed upon the American people and used the awesome...
What Marxist? I hate red baiting because they never say anything. It's just, oh my God, Marxism is scary. Whatever.
Power of the federal government to cow us into...
Whoa. Marxists aren't... I mean, maybe there's like two, but no. Stop.
To interfere in our homes. they've got to be put on notice. They've got to be quaking in fear. They've got to be worried. They've got to be losing weight because they're not eating, because they're worried that they're going to end up going to jail for using the awesome power of the federal government. And if they're not interested in showing up in Mr. Jordan's hearing, you know what? I'm in charge now, and the transfer.
What are you talking about, dude? I don't even know what you're talking about. What, like, are you talking about liberals going after Trump?
Transportation Committee of Federal Leases. Isn't that something? I wonder whose leases might be coming. Well, we're taking a look at the list. It's going to be awesome when they go from a big building to about, I don't know, that space on the square there.
Wait, okay. So let me get this. You know, it's only got 7 seconds left. Let's let it play.
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
I love it.
Like, we got a fight on every corner, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, let's play that last bit again, okay? So let's let him play that again.
Todd, that.
All right, let's about 40 seconds in. All right, what did he say? What did he say?
Whose leases might be coming?
No, hold on. We gotta go back even further. Sorry. All right.
Transportation Committee of Federal Leases.
Federal leases. So leasing on federal land.
Isn't that something? I wonder whose leases might be coming. Well, we're taking a look at the list. It's going to be awesome when they go from a big building to about, I don't know, that space on the square there. Todd, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
I love it.
Like,
so this could be talking about federal government in general, but is he?
we got a fight on every corner, ladies and gentlemen.
Fight on every corner. Okay, so this is an example of classic projection, okay? What we are seeing here with Scott Perry is, what Nikki is saying here, don't obey the subpoena, lose your office space, right? But he said on every corner. So he is talking about using the power of the federal government to punish political enemies. Essentially doing what Ron DeSantis did to Disney, but on the federal government level. Somebody has a lease for government land to, I don't know, build a solar plant, maybe, right? Take that away. Because they didn't kowtow to Republican demands in the culture war. We got a federal lease in an office building, a federal office building, because they don't use all, in some office buildings, if the federal government owns it, they lease offices to different agencies and different people. Don't kowtow to the Republican line, you're going to lose your lease. So they are explicitly talking about using the power of the federal government to punish political enemies. They're not even hiding it. And sure, maybe you can say the Democrats did it too. Maybe there's some argument there. I don't agree with you, but at least, we can talk about that. Maybe Democrats shouldn't have gone as hard on some people as they did. Okay? Maybe. But all you're saying now is like, well, they did it, so now I can do it. So where's your principled stand here? You don't have one. So you're just saying you want to use the power of government that you're complaining about against people you don't like. So it's not the fact that the government did something wrong. It's that they did something wrong against the wrong person. And we're going to talk more about that in a bit. But that's what they're doing here. And this is a great segue. We're going to combine these two segments into one. This is a great segue to talk about what else they're talking about. They, Republican pundits, thought makers, strategists, openly talking about when it comes to using the power of government against political enemies. And of course, we are talking now about Florida. Florida was already mentioned We're going to mention it again because there's more developments coming out of it. And in Florida, where woke is no joke, trans kids are canceled and teachers can't say gay, of course, there are any number of stories we could report on from the fiefdom of Governor Ron DeSantis, which is an apt explanation or apt comparison to talk about. But we only have 2 hours, so here these 2 reports will have to suffice. First up is a new college of Florida gets desanitized. Good one. Good one on that one. So, New College of Florida's Board of Trustees abolished the office handling diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, according to a report from USA Today. The action came after a contentious and emotional hearing that included testimony from students worried that a board reshaped by Governor Ron DeSantis is making the school an unwelcoming place to minorities. DeSantis appointed 6 handpicked members to New College's board on January 6th. Interesting. His intention is clear here. He wants to transform the school, and he's putting the small Sarasota institution at the center of the GOP's nationwide pushback on education in general. DeSantis and Republican extremists in other states have created policies that take aim at historically marginalized groups, including racial minorities and LGBTQ individuals. DeSantis has emerged as a key national figure in this debate after he pushed through legislation governing how K-12 schools discuss race and gender identity by not discussing it. He also recently prohibited an advanced placement course in African American studies under the auspices that it included woke bullshit like, I don't know, gender identity and something else. You can never be sure what the actual reason is because these people don't tell you. You can only surmise about it by what they allude to. So now the governor has turned his focus to university programs. He's targeted programs across all Florida's public universities, and New College is first in line. On the chopping block this week was the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, initiatives. DEI initiatives have become a major flashpoint for conservatives and a target of DeSantis throughout Florida's public university system. Eliminating DEI is among the first substantive actions by New College's revamped board. The DeSantis-aligned governor board also fired the former president last month and hired DeSantis ally Richard Cochran as interim president. Among DeSantis' new college board appointees is prominent conservative activist Christopher Rufo, who pushed at his first meeting late last month to abolish diversity programs entirely. The board decided to wait until more research could be done, though. College administrator Brad Thiessen presented the results of his DEI review, addressing everything from faculty training to hiring practices and student admission. Thiessen said that there was actually little mandatory diversity training in the college at all. He found that the college had only recently asked prospective faculty to submit a statement in their job application outlining how they would promote diversity in their application. Additionally, only one of the employees in the Office of Outreach and Inclusive Excellence was primarily focused on DEI programs at all. The others managed grants, worked on community outreach, and performed other activities that aren't controversial. Rufo conceded that DEI isn't as deeply embedded in the college practices as he expected, but said it was still important to remove it on principle. Rufo and DeSantis appointed trustee Matthew Spalding both suggested it is discriminatory to take race into account when setting the college's priorities. Of course, they don't want to acknowledge that race is still kind of important. Even though it shouldn't be, it still is. The 70s weren't that long ago. One generation removed. Oh, we can say the 80s. So latest example, 80s is when the last major redlining case was settled. The last major one was I wanted to say it was 1988. So we're looking at what, 40 years? A little under 40 years, less than a generation ago. You know, these programs might be still important then. So, quote, "It treats people differently on the basis of their skin color," Rufo said. "This is discrimination. It should be gone," Spaulding added. The majority of trustees voted to have Cochrane move forward with eliminating Office of Outreach and Inclusion Excellence, which handles its DEI program. The office's 4 employees will be offered other jobs. Trustees also voted to eliminate the diversity statement when hiring faculty and to direct Cochrane to consider adopting a prohibition on diversity training for its employees. The board also... Sorry, give me a second. Okay. The board also voted to have Cochrane create a school policy that prohibits spending money on any DEI efforts. Under new regulation, DEI will be confined to include any effort to manipulate or otherwise influence the composition of the faculty or student body with reference to race, sex, color, or ethnicity. The definition of DEI also includes, quote, "any effort to promote as the official position of the administration, the college, or any administrative unit thereof, a particular widely contested opinion referencing unconscious or implicit bias." Things that kind of exist: cultural appropriation, allyship, transgender ideology, which doesn't mean anything. They just mean the existence of trans people and gender as a separate thing from sex. Microaggressions, another thing that actually exists. Group marginalization, another thing that actually exists. Anti-racism, can't be an anti-racist anymore apparently. Systemic oppression, another thing that actually exists that we talked about above in Mississippi. Social justice, they don't like it. Justice is an interpersonal thing or whatever. Intersectionality, neopronouns, which are basically not used by anybody. Even if they are, it's a kind of decent respect, man. Just fucking say the neopronoun. Shut the fuck up. Heteronormativity, another thing that actually exists. Disparate impact, that is another thing that actually exists. Gender theory, which goes in line with transgender ideology. Racial or sexual privilege, or any related formulation of these concepts. In other words, ban anything that liberals and progressives on a social level might want. Now, the rollback of New College's diversity program came at the end of a 3.5-hour meeting that featured emotional testimony from students, parents, and others. The college builds itself as a community of free thinkers and risk takers and trailblazers, and invites prospective New College students to, quote, "discover a public arts and science education driven by your curiosity, career aspirations, and individual learning styles." Rufo makes it clear his intention for Florida colleges and universities, though, in this tweet. And again, it's another thing of classic projection. Let me, you know what? You can read that, right? Yeah. "We will be shutting down low-performing, ideological captured academic departments and hiring new faculty. The student body will be recomposed over time. Some current students will select out. Others will graduate. We'll recruit new students who are mission aligned." Let's say that again. We'll recruit new students who are mission aligned. What they are saying is that they are going to turn New College into a conservative university. They are going to turn New College into a university that promotes conservative values. They are going to make New College University a thing that they hate when liberals do it. They want to make it an indoctrination center. Again, it is not a principle to be anti-indoctrination. Anti-indoctrination for the majority of people is simply teaching people things that we don't like, regardless if they're true or not. From liberals, from some progressives, that can include sex differences. For conservatives, it's everything else. It is any kind of thing that has been come to the forefront of American cultural conscious since, we'll say, maybe 2006. the internet exploded and people were able to actually articulate things that they've experienced their entire lives with new language they were exposed to, because the wealth of information and the connectivity of us all helped give words to think, to impact, to the things that have been impacting them. Intersectionality, for example, a thing that was a nascent idea back in like the 80s, really among, budding third wave feminists, exploded because of the internet. It wasn't because of feminist indoctrination in colleges. I don't know about you. I went to college between 2004 and 2008. I'm a little older on this platform than many of you. But I didn't learn about any of that in college. I learned about it on the internet. After I graduated, I was exposed to some of it, maybe, the ideas of it, maybe, in a introspective, maybe, course about political theory. It wasn't a thing that I was drummed into me. It wasn't like, you should believe this because it is moral and right. It was more like, here is what somebody thinks of this issue. You agree? Why don't you agree? You still disagree? Okay. That's essentially how my college went. Now, I really don't think I was introduced to intersectionality and any feminist thought in college at all, but I'm giving I'm giving it credence that maybe other people were, but that's not indoctrination. Talking about what people believe isn't forcing you to take on their beliefs. But if that's all you offer, which is what this appears to be doing, which is what Rufo appears to want, then that is what is going to happen. This is classic projection, or tit for tat of a tat that didn't, or a tat for a tit that never happened, essentially. Oh no, students protested Ben Shapiro showing up to, I don't know, some college somewhere. Oh no, it must have been they couldn't have thought of that on their own. It must have been those dastardly, evil, Marxist public educators. It's asinine, dude. It is really, really, really dumb. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, if you actually care about teaching people about the world, you should want them to be exposed to all ideas. Wasn't that the conservative position, 4 years ago? We want the marketplace of ideas to dominate and let the truth lean to the surface. But as soon as they started losing in the marketplace of ideas, the authoritarianism came out. And that's what this is. That's part of what this is. So the public, continuing on, the public raised concerns that went beyond eliminating diversity programs, including DeSantis's broader effort to reshape the school as Cochran's $699,000 base salary and other issues. Reverend Dr. John Dohauer, who leads the church that helped found New College as a private school in 1960, is outraged by what DeSantis is doing to the school. Dohauer's United Church of Christ provided funding to create New College, and church members were active in the school during its early days. He spoke at a board meeting where he told trustees that their actions will be judged harshly by history. Quote, "The long arc of history will grind you into dust, and you will be remembered for the sycophants that you are," he said. That's what history does. So, again, what we are seeing is conservatives using the power of the state to enforce their cultural dogma. I don't know what you want to call that, but that is what's happening. And that concludes this segment, the News Roundup. Excuse me. All right. I'm going to be right back. I have to pee. Stick around though. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. All right, we have more news to cover, so we're going to continue on. Let's get to it. And now we're going to... Oh, what do we got? What do we got? Oh, shoot, it's already been 2 hours. We're gonna go on to the Dilbert fiasco. I'm sure some of y'all seen this. I've seen you falling down. Dilbert. So yeah, so for those that don't know, Scott Adams got into some trouble, and so we got some good memes going on. This is Dilbert as falling down because you know white boy can't take it no more, and sometimes they fight back or something. I don't know. We're gonna get into it. So let's go ahead and actually just start with Scott Adams' little video, little racist rant, and talk about why he said what he said, why normies are needing to get a little more political savvy, and other things. Let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to go over to Scott Adams here. This is a 2-minute rant about a poll. Let's listen. Let's listen. Let's give him a little bit of airtime and dunk on him while we do so.
So if you know nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me.
Okay. So let's talk about this right now. So this polling question is this Rasserman's poll. And this Rasserman's poll is talking about a known dog whistle of it's okay to be white. This was a 4chan driven campaign to get dumb liberals to basically like, what? No, it's not. What are you talking about? Who's saying it's not? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Whatever. Like, in order to get people to think more racist thoughts. Okay. And what everybody on the conservative media has been saying, what they've said, okay, is this from Turning Points USA. Rasserman poll finds only 53% of black Americans think it's okay to be white. But let's look at the actual tabulation from Rasserman's, a C-rated polling agency, one that is kind of doing things for conservative in general, what it says about it. So this poll finds that black people, by and large, 53% say that, yeah, right here. So 51% say somewhat agree or strongly agree that it's okay to be white. Now, knowing this is a 4chan troll, knowing that it's used by white supremacists, obviously some people are going to be like, hey, I know what this dog whistle is. So let's say that, let's say what it is and say, we don't agree with that. So there's probably, some of those are probably in the 8% here. Some of those are probably in the 18% here. And some of them are probably in this 21% here. The polling margin of error for this poll, for this demographic in the poll, is 6%. So you, right there, that's almost within just the polling margin of error. 21% said not sure. Because they don't know what it means. What does it mean it's okay to be white? Right? It's ridiculous. Okay? But that's what he's talking about. He's talking about this poll that, again, conservative media, conservative media, like Turning Points USA, is trying to parlay into some grand narrative that black people don't like white people. They don't think it's okay to exist as a white person. But, as we said, the racist dog whistle, which we'll get into a little bit more later. Well, let's go ahead and let him talk some more. Let's find out how he reacted to this and why people are calling him racist.
According to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group.
Okay. No.
And I don't want to have anything
You wouldn't say that about white people.
to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people.
And that's where you fuck up. Because what you're saying, okay, segregation based is what you're saying here. You're saying it's inevitable and we shouldn't do anything to stop it. You were given two options to react to this poll. One was to be like, damn, why don't some black people think it's not okay to be white? Is it something white people are doing? Or are they just racist? You're given those two options. And one option is to be like, okay, let's fix this. And the other option is, fuck it, let's just leave. And he's going with the racist choice. He's going with the easy out choice. Separatism is cringe, is what I'm saying. And that's where he's going with.
Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed.
Yeah, it can. You're a defeatist fuckwit. Knowing that this is a bullshit question to begin with.
Right, this can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population. Okay. So, he's using this poll as post fact justification for a thing he already did and already believes. Because unfortunately, there's a high correlation between the density. And this is according to Don Lemon, by the way. So here I'm just
let me dangle this black man. Let me dangle this black man over here as defense for my racist thinking. A black person believes it, and it can't be racist.
Quoting Don Lemon when he notes that when he lived in a mostly black neighborhood.
You're not going to talk about poverty concentration? Guarantee you there's a lot of black neighborhoods in Atlanta that have low crime. Wonder why that is.
There were a bunch of problems that he didn't see in white neighborhoods.
Sure, buddy.
So even Don Lemon sees a big difference in your own quality of living based on where you live and who's there. So I think it makes no sense whatsoever as a white citizen of America.
Again, he's saying segregation, separatism. Like, no, you're given the choice of how to react to this poll. Assuming the poll meant what he thinks it means, which it doesn't, which he doesn't actually believe. Let's be real. He's just using, again, post-fact justification for what he already believes is confirmation bias. You're given two options to address this, and you're choosing the racist one. Oh, wrong button.
America to try to help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's no longer a rational.
Wait, so you only help people if you can get something out of it? The rationale is that they are fellow citizens that may be requiring help. Hey, hell, fuck citizens. They're fellow human beings that might need help. But since you're not going to get anything out of it, come on.
Impulse. And so I'm gonna back off from being.
Sorry about that. Continue.
Helpful to black America, because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Like, I've been doing it all my life, and the only outcome is I get called a racist.
Well, maybe stop doing racist things. Like this fucking rant.
That's the only outcome. It makes no sense to help black Americans if you're white. It's over.
All right, I'm going to stop playing this because I don't like his repetition of it, because the repetition of this for another minute and a half or so is designed to make it sticky in your head if you're already leaning that way. All right. So, again, Rasmussen's poll, it's junk. It's a junk question entirely. But look at this. Look at this. Apparently, everyone but the accused racist knew it's okay to be white was a racist meme. Yeah. So this is what we got to talk about this. I don't know if Scott Adams knew that it was racist or not. The reason that it's effective, though, is because it is able to entirely hide someone's racism behind an innocuous statement. The easy ramification of this would be to have been like, yeah, it's okay to be white, it's okay to be black, it's okay to be Mexican, whatever, Latino, Asian, it's okay to be anything, except an evil piece of shit. But because we know its origins, and a lot of people like touting things that they know and revealing some secret hidden truth, which was a secret hidden truth, like this is why this thing exists, that people are now saying that no, this statement's racist, because it is designed to be, and it's going to make normie, make politically unaware, make the people that are asleep question whether or not people are being racist to white people who push back against this innocuous statement. And because of that, Scott Adams, who has already admitted to leaving areas where black people live because he feels some certain way, to hide behind the innocuous statement. Which is why we responded here. Yeah, that's why Rasmussen chose to be a survey, but you chose to react to it by saying, fuck them, let's segregate. So again, given the choice to not be racist, he chose to be racist. He chose to be a segregationist. He chose to be a separatist. And that is why Dilbert got canceled by its syndicated column, and now he has to put it up on a Substack or something else. And why all these juicy memes falling down Dilbert. Where's another one? Oh, these are great. Like, oh, there's so many good ones. Oh, here's a good one. This one's real good. This one's like high quality. Look at this. Look at that one. Wow. Is being done. So, yeah, that's what we got. But that, my friends, concludes our segment about Scott Adams choosing racism, and the choice was obvious to not be, and how he got canceled. So, as you may know, we like to close out our news roundup with a story of weird, a weird segment, right? And this week's segment is interesting, kind of gross, It's kind of it's got all the things. Okay, so let's talk about it. Hold on 1 second. There we go. So what are we going to see? Well, let's get into it. A Peruvian food delivery man who was dropping off an order was searched at an archaeological site in Puno. When police looked inside his delivery cooler bag, it was carrying just about the farthest thing from food you could think of. And what do we have here? Well, we have a video of that now. Look at this. What? Found a mummy in a delivery man's cooler bag after they went to investigate a group of men drinking in the streets. What? Julio Caesar said the mummy, which he calls Juanita, had belonged to his family for 30 years after talks to donate the piece to a local museum failed. That's a very strange thing. All right, let's talk about the news bit a bit more. So the man, identified by Reuters as Julio Cesar, told a local news outlet that the mummy's name is Juanita and that it had been in his family for 30 years. He's quoted as saying, "It sleeps in my bedroom with me. There's my bed, the TV, and next to it, there's Juanita," he said on Saturday. "I take care of it. It's like, if you'll pardon the expression, as if it was my spiritual girlfriend." Peru's Ministry of Culture took custody of the mummy, saying it was mummified adult male that had believed to be between 600 and 800 years old. The mummy is believed to have been around 45 years old at the time of his death, and now measures to just under 5 feet, according to the BBC. The mummy's estimated age means that he was likely alive during the reign of the Inca Empire, which rose in the early 1200s and ruled until around 1533, according to the Smithsonian Institute. The man and 2 friends he was with at the time that they were confronted by police are now being investigated, the BBC had said. So, strange story, finding some strange things across the world. We like to report on it. It's a little palate cleanser, but that's what we do. And with that, I'm sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. If you haven't subscribed or followed us on Twitch yet, please do so. We like to give a special shout out to our Facebook community who's provided some of the articles that we've shared with you in the news here, and a special shout out to our producer, Nikki Adams, because without her, our news segments would not be as nearly as in-depth or coherent as they are today. So thank you for that. You can contact us for various different things, whether you want to debate or have a certain thing covered, in the following ways. First, you can hit us up on Discord. Join the Discord, link above or below, depending on where you're watching this. And we're trying to build our community. That's where we do our live shows, where we do our debates, is through Discord. Easiest way to get a hold of us. You can also find us over in Twitter at crowdsourcedpoll, where we tweet about different things, maybe a little less often than we used to. And if you do the Mastodon, you can get us at CSP at Federated Press, federated.press over at Mastodon as well. And as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.